Why was Luke Skywalker's Jedi the most powerful Jedi that the galaxy had ever seen, and the most powerful order? Greetings, curious acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to the Archives. The Jedi Order has gone through various degrees of power over the centuries. Depending on the time in which the Order was placed, the current events and the current members could alter the Jedi Order's collective power drastically. While the Jedi had far more influence in the Clone Wars, and had far more warriors during the Old Republic, our researchers here believe that the Jedi were at their most powerful in terms of Force ability during the time of Luke Skywalker's Jedi Praxium. It is a surprising thing to say, as Luke Skywalker's Academy didn't exactly have all the knowledge and resources that the previous Jedi temples had within them. However, it would all boil down to Luke's training methods and the specific members he chose, which would cause his Jedi Order to become the strongest by far. We know that these are very bold claims, so let us give you some examples and then go into why we believe that this era of the Jedi Order would be the Jedi at their most powerful and potentially most powerful by far. We can already see how the Skywalker family alone would buff out the ranks of their order in terms of power, with the Chosen One's genetics running through their veins. Ben Skywalker, Jacen and Jaina Solo, along with Anakin Solo, would all be naturally incredibly powerful. However, the other members of the Order, specifically the first 12 members, would all be impressively powerful in their own right. And I believe that this would be the secret to Luke's long-term plan of the Jedi. We first of course have Mara Jade and Kyle Katarn. Mara had not only been trained by Darth Sidious in the ways of the Force, but she had been specifically chosen by Sidious due to her potential. Kyle Katarn had gained his powers in the Force hereditarily from his father, and would go on to cultivate his power by taking care of a dangerous group of Dark Jedi. But the others are quite interesting as well, and the other choices that Luke chose to fill his order, as many of them were already quite powerful whenever Luke first found and met them. But he honed them through his training in order to focus this power. There was the Jedi Kirana T, who was actually one of the Night Sisters of Dathomir who became a Jedi after Luke approached her. She had been raised in the magic of Dathomir, and was well versed in the ways of the Force due to the Night Sisters, or at least how they perceived the Force. She had a raw power that she wanted to tame, and so Luke Skywalker agreed to train her. This Jedi would go on to have incredible use of the Force in a support role, able to bolster the power of her allies and keep herself rooted in the light when faced with darkness. She was a part of the team that had fought against the spirit of Exar Kun, and she would later return to Dathomir and set up her own Jedi Praxium there. Along with this Jedi, there was also Dorsk 81, who at one point had all of the Jedi pool their power into him and managed to push 17 Imperial Star Destroyers out of the Yavin system, again alone. That's several times more powerful than we've even seen Starkiller himself exhibit. Of course though, Dorsk 81 was overwhelmed by that experience, and shortly unfortunately died afterward, but this feat still remains. One of the most interesting Jedi of Luke's Academy was known as Streen, a man who had originally been a Tibanna gas engineer on Bespin prior to the Empire's takeover. Streen had such a powerful natural attunement to Force empathy that he could sense the thoughts, feelings, and desires of every living person that surrounded him. It got so overwhelming that he had to isolate himself for decades before being approached by Luke, who helped him find a way to focus his thoughts and block out all others. Beyond this though, Streen also had a great record, as he had a particular attunement to the Force ability Alter Environment, and even could specifically conjure Force storms, usually a dark side ability, and yet it was something that came naturally to him. About 2 years into his training, Streen was able to levitate himself through the Force, something that we only see the most powerful beings such as Sidious, Vader, and Dooku managing to do. It was also Streen who struck the final blow to the spirit of Exar Kun, using his master, Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. We could keep going, but we think you get the point. And of course, the Force feats of individuals such as Mara Jade and the Skywalkers do not need to be explained here. The rest of the Jedi that Luke chose would be all massive aids during the Yuuzhan Vong invasion, which Luke's Jedi Academy would be able to repel despite being only a fraction of the size that the Clone Wars Jedi Order was. The future generations that Luke would teach also continued in this cycle of power, and a cycle of power that became a staple for this academy. So, what was Luke Skywalker's secret? We believe that it can all be boiled down to a simple fact. Luke Skywalker had actually followed in the footsteps of what the Sith would do. specifically though when choosing their apprentices. Allow me to explain. The Sith have a method of choosing their apprentices among those who are already grown into adulthood or young adulthood, exclusively choosing those who have incredible potential in the Force and had already began to manifest their powers. Luke may not have done this intentionally, but he did find students of his own among those who were already very powerful in the Force and somewhat developed, though untrained. In some cases, such as with Mara Jade and Kirana T, they had already received a small amount of training within the Force and were already familiar with the basics, which made Luke Skywalker's job much easier. Luke remembered that he was already a young man who had trained a few days under Ben Kenobi before he would be honed into Jedihood by Grandmaster Yoda. Luke also remembered how unfair it was that only the young could be taught the ways of the Force. I have a theory that Luke was specifically looking for adults, or at least teenagers for this time around. Skeen himself was actually an older man by the time that Luke found him. Since most of them were already powerful in the Force, it was under Luke's guidance that they would simply hone their abilities and eventually align it completely to the light and the Jedi. What's more is that Luke encouraged his students to get married so that they could produce more Force-sensitive offspring. The second secret to his power, though, is that many of the Jedi within Luke's academy actually intermarried with one another. This would cause many of the children that they produced to be born into the academy and into Jedi life from the very beginning, not to mention, naturally, making them very powerful in the Force. This is something that hadn't been done since the days of the Jedi Order of the ancient times. Thousands of years, my acolytes. Since Luke Skywalker's order was nearly exclusively made of extremely powerful Jedi, they could produce extremely powerful offspring. Luke never had the resources to take Force-sensitive children when they were super young like the Clone Wars era did, so he had to take what Force-sensitives were there and just have them raise the children. And it seems he actually was quite good at teaching powerful young ones, as he could teach them with the love and care that was never granted to the Jedi of the past. This is the third secret to Luke Skywalker's power and the Jedi Academy, which was of course Luke's actual training. The exact teaching methods that the Jedi of his academy underwent were vastly different than that of the previous order. While Luke retained some of the teaching methods that he found in holocrons of the Jedi of the past, as well as the path of the Jedi, he had mostly taken influences from them and put a more modern spin on things to make sure that this new generation wouldn't make the same mistakes that the past did. One of the biggest changes was allowing the Jedi to not only keep, but cultivate their attachments and relationships. Luke incredibly noticed that a Force-sensitive accesses more power when they harness their emotion, and it doesn't always lead to the dark side like Yoda and Obi-Wan had taught. Luke taught his students to use their attachments as a way to bolster their power within the light. Basically, their love gave them something to fight for. It was the same love that Luke had used on his father on the second Death Star, which turned him back to the light and won the day. This familial love would keep his Jedi bound together and working as one. What this resulted in was that the Jedi of this academy were able to tap into the very depths of their reserves and bring out their true power and get the most out of their potential. That's the key. Luke's training brought out everyone's true potential. We had talked about once before in another holocron how Luke actually allowed some of his students to study the dark side. This was of course only for certain Jedi Knights, and when they did so, it was always under the supervision of a master or even Luke himself. This allowed his students to be familiar with their enemy and know the tricks of tapping into and using the dark side as well as its traps. Perhaps that is the fourth secret. His Jedi were not ignorant. Ignorant breeds arrogance, and it was arrogance that caused the downfall of the previous order of the Jedi. Most of Luke Skywalker's students knew what they were up against and kept their egos in check. This would stop the whole order from becoming blind to the machinations of the dark side, and in this way, the Jedi were unified and nearly indomitable as an entire reborn order. So my friends, this was our reasoning for why Luke Skywalker's Jedi were the most powerful in all of the Order's history. When you look at the facts, it actually is pretty straightforward, but we would like to know if you agree with our assessment, and if not, make sure to comment down below. And if you disagree, which era of Jedi do you think are the most powerful? But if you agree, do you agree with our reasoning, or did we miss something? And until next time, my friends and acolytes, may the Force be with you, and have a great day.